So many people who don't have a life.
So Fred just got here. No.
Hello.
No, I know. I've been. So it's a shame Raphael's not here because I got given this for Christmas, which I think he'd enjoy.
So through the library.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing no one really needs to read, but I shall enjoy doing so.
I hope Brandel comes today because things.
So if you have,
Hang on, I'm going to change network.
No, I gotta hear what's yours. I don't really do. Yeah, sorry. I don't think in terms of holidays or events too terribly much. So it didn't even dawn on me until yesterday that this is New Year's Eve.
yeah.
So I haven't done much. I did go see, however, I went to the movie theater for the first time since well before COVID, but certainly not during COVID times, and saw a delightful film.
Oh, nice.
It was Spider-Man.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, I hear that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
I didn't
actor-
have I didn't have great expectations. Just kind of wanted to see something at a theater, right? Like you would a drive-in or whatever. Oh man, it was so funny. I really, really enjoyed it.
That's
No,
really good.
I shall fess up to some this is a real sort of, this is a cultural failing on my part because it's certainly broadly in this country there is a thing that around about a week before Christmas everything starts slowing up a bit and sort of people drop by for the hope that there might be some pre-Christmas sort of entertainment or thing, and it. The ideal week is where Christmas and New Year span a whole week because clearly no one can get anything done between those things. So there is this weird thing that, apart from those who are working out in hospitality or something, for many people it's sort of this lovely dead period, and it's a holiday. Lucky as I am to live where I do, that sort of has survived under the radar. So they're all. This idea that your summer holiday may be at a different time to mine, and this is always a thing of angst. But you can normally rely, certainly here, on the fact that most people are sort of not around. Which I was reminded by this, where someone on the West Coast sort of emailed me in some worry that I was maybe ill or something because he said you're always online. I said, well, I am, but less so at the moment. And also after a good dinner is probably not the best time to be online.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Alan, we have a family obligation to like the Spider-Man movies because Tom Holland, the actor, he went to the same school my son Edgar is going to.
What?
And that's not entirely the only reason we chose that school. It may be 80%, but it's not 100%.
It really, I gotta say that, yeah, I've really enjoyed the Spider-Man movies, the new ones, and I just recently watched the ones with James Garfield. Not just recently, I don't know, like a year ago, but I totally was not even aware that it was a thing, and saw those and enjoyed those too. Like yeah, the Spider-Man movies are legitimately pretty darn good.
Yeah, they don't take themselves too seriously.
Yeah.
Also,
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Oh.
I'm finishing, as you know, since I mentioned it constantly, my thesis supposedly today. I'll hand it in on Sunday. But in the section on BR at the end of it, I'm referencing The Expanse. You're all watching The Expanse, right?
I stopped watching. I'll pick it up at some point.
I mean, there was one season that got a bit boring where they were stuck on one planet. But the reason I'm referencing it is, so yesterday I bought the Oculus Quest 2, which is very exciting. Nothing to do with Brandel, obviously, nothing at all. But the kind of the use case, in sci-fi like that, it's all the same. You have a hologram. They don't use headsets, obviously. But then when you're done, you just wave it away like this. I think the first uses of VR will be like that too. It'll be easy on and off your head, but it'll feel like you're just waving it on. You need it, take it off, need it, take it off. So they did a kind of a few beautiful kind of a hologram type projections in some of the recent episodes.
Well, ironically, I came back from a dinner last night and ended up watching sort of the last sort of 3/4 of Ready Player One.
Yeah,
and I love the closing line, and we're going to close the whole thing down for 2 days a week because people are going to go out and live. I thought, amen.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
I cannot stand that book. Sorry. I actually, when I read that one, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I felt I am still, for the record, YouTube, convinced that Ready Player One is the first novel written by an AI, fed entirely on cultural memes and what a novel should feel like, and utterly devoid of content.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there wasn't much content. I agree with that.
Yeah, I must say, I read the book, and I mean, I watched the film sort of knowing what the book had said, and the book, you know, is something I read because people said, oh, well, you ought to, you know, this is another sci-fi sort of you should read. And I'm thinking, yes. But hey,
It's not sci-fi, though.
it seemed more apposite now than when I last watched the film. So, you know, Zuckerberg, IOI, kind of same thing. You know?
One thing that was quite, the reason that I got the Oculus, I feel the need to explain. Last session we had, one of my very oldest friends, Keith, was there, and he's now in charge of documentation for Facebook Meta. So that's
what's Keith's last name?
Martin, Keith Martin. Known him since.
I really enjoyed talking with him.
Yeah, he's super sweet guy. I've known him for basically forever. So he made us put on the Oculus, showed us some new things, and I was impressed by a couple of things. Number one, how when you put it on, you have to define where the room is. You draw a little box and it knows it, or a shape or whatever. Then if you get close to a wall in virtual space, this almost like holodeck shape comes in to say, don't go any further. And I was just thinking, the amount of processing just for that is really quite impressive.
Yeah. It should have a little numbered door at the bottom, though, in a side quest. So, you know, if you're bored with the work you're doing, you can go on a little side quest.
That's cute. A new thing they have is apparently you double tap on the helmet and it goes and you can see through because it has pass-through video.
Oh, it's double tap on the helmet now, huh?
Yeah, that's apparently a new preference. Obviously, I've been reading up like mad over the last 2 days, but there are so many elegant.
I love the UX challenges. Yeah.
It's time to get one. And also the sales figures for the Quest have gone through the roof. I think it's selling better than Xbox right now.
I have the Oculus just before this for the 2. So I don't want to get obviously the 2, and I stopped using it after Facebook required. I don't know if they've reverted that, but when they like require that you have a Facebook account, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to sell this thing.
Randall, I got the Oculus 2 yesterday.
Oh, terrific.
It hasn't been delivered yet, but that's why we're talking about it now. And there's so many reality issues around it that are so fascinating. And Alan just revealed he has the Oculus One. So I think we should all try to go into VR space at some point, guys.
I was going to say, you can practice by just taping over your glasses and walking around the house and bumping into things. That's practice for the Oculus.
I think that's
there's
Mark.
There's a lab in Stanford here. I'm not at Stanford, but in the Bay Area, called the Virtual Human Interaction Lab, and they've done a lot of research in virtual reality, where they take the headset and all of the attendant field of view issues, they tear out the apparatus and then put you in real spaces, and then compare what sort of what kind of perceptual effects having things like the headset without real things on are. So playing with putting you in performances and plays and what you do and how you feel as a consequence to your
brilliant
Mark. Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff I want to work on. Oh, I love that.
So
those UX challenges. Go ahead.
it's fascinating because of the impact it has on what psychological sort of role you play, as well as how deeply it hits that kind of thing. There's a book. It's called Experience on Demand by Jeremy Bailenson, and he's done a number of speeches and talks at various places that are pretty interesting. I'll put a link in the chat.
Peter, I see you have a virtual hand up.
Yes, I have some eye candy for you. This is a website I just stumbled onto. It's called Hudson GUI, and has detailed descriptions and analysis of all of the different user interfaces in various sci-fi movies, including a big section on The Expanse.
Oh, that's really cool.
Have you guys checked out Your Wish is My Command?
Link, please.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still around, but sorry, Peter, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Yeah, I have the book on my shelf.
Oh, great. Yeah, so yeah, I love it. The angle is this guy's a sci-fi apologist. And so he makes the assumption that everything we see in sci-fi movies is correct, like explosions in space, and then seeks to reverse engineer why that works. Like a famous one in Star Wars, why do you hear explosions? And he comes up with this whole elaborate, well, it's part of the UI because if you want to hear the explosions while you're shooting, so in space where things are happening. So he puts forward that it's basically you're hearing the spaceship simulate explosions so that the pilot or the gunner can do a better job shooting things. Love it. And they do Logan's Run that way. Yeah, I'll find a link.
That's really, really interesting. Really, and thanks for that link there, Brandel, on the lab there. Courtesy, Professor. That's funny. I mean, like in flight sims, I know this is fake, but very often you have things moving like little stars, just to give you a sense of the movement. So why not in a supposedly real spaceship add sounds to help you orient yourself? It makes complete sense. There's something I read earlier in this book that I've all been, what's going on with this stupid thing? It's the Metazoa book.
Yeah.
It's a bit on octopuses. And I thought this was really interesting. And I'm specifically wondering, Brandel, if you have a perspective on this. Because when octopuses usually, a lot of creatures like this, they have one eye for different thing. One eye for predator, one eye for eating. They're focused, like we have a predominant eye, that predominant eyes for different uses. So they don't have very good depth perception. So what they do, if something comes near, they bob up and down a little bit. So it says, this is active information seeking and vision, and also something that requires handling subtle relations between what is called reafference, sensory changes caused by your own actions, and exafference, sensory changes caused by something going on outside you. I didn't even know those words existed. Did you guys?
I know afferent and efferent from the nervous system. So afferent and efferent. So I used to do a lot of medical diagram illustration.
Of course, that's where we know it from. Thank you.
Yeah.
You just hitched it on that. But in terms of presentations in VR, of thinking about, are you the one making the 3D thing happen, or is it making it happen? I thought it was a really good way of presenting it.
Is it that's the same guy as did this, isn't it? That was his, his earlier one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry. Anyway, it's called Other Minds. Go ahead, Brandel.
Yes.
It's the same guy, and it's an amazing book. It has so many quotable, thinkable moments in it.
Yeah,
I was wrong, by the way. It's not Your Wish is My Command. It was Make It So. Continue.
Even better name.
On the subject of that sort of reafferent versus exoferent input, the thing that I built a couple days ago, or sort of I mentioned last week, but I put some input into it. It has some pretty interesting sort of impacts. This is just a short couple-minute video. I don't particularly narrate it well, but it's interesting, and I'll give you a link to it. It's online.
You want to play it?
You'll be able to play it on.
Is that the link?
Sure.
Hang on, I'm just going to share screen and we watch it all together. Shall we do that?
Sure. Yeah. No. It's the YouTube link. It's like 3 minutes.
Yeah, I will play it for everybody.
Cool.
Hang on, share sound. Yeah. Boom, boom.
Just write a script first.
Can you see it now? Kind of?
Yeah.
All right. I've turned volume up now.
Hey everybody, I am playing with some YouTube analytics. This is
The volume is really low. Do you want to just speak over it fresh? Do you mind?
Sure, yeah. So this is one of the YouTube videos of this this salon, and it has the moving means of all of the different terms when they have occurred over the lifetime of the video. So you have them, you're using all of the 3D, so X is time here, Z is all of the different words, and Y is the frequency. But we have the ability to manipulate it with this controller, the controller in my left hand here. And what's cool about it is that I lift up the different sort of pieces of the graph by moving around, and which part I'm lifting up depends on Z. But what I'm doing in X is changing the sharpness, the Q value of the curve, so that I have the ability to kind of modify my selection sort of in real time. And one of the things that it sort of emphasizes is the fact that when you have more degrees of freedom, more degrees of control over something, then you can have much more nuanced manipulation. That you'd have to click a button and change a slider in 2D or other systems. That really never gives you the ability to grok, to understand that at a visceral level. Never at a reflexive level can you kind of develop those expertise. And it just occurred to me because my daughter got a paleontology kit, just a little thing where you sort of chip away at a little dinosaur bones inside a block of stuff. And she was terrible at it at the beginning, and she was less terrible at it within 20 minutes. And it wasn't something that she was conscious of. It was just that she was able to orient her body and move her hands and hold stuff in a different way. And we don't have that relationship with computers because we don't have that nuance of input and interaction. Frode, you're very good with Photoshop, but the way that you be good with Photoshop is by changing sliders. And there are knacks to it, but it's not the same as the knack that one develops for cutting cheese versus cutting salami as a consequence of knowing how much you need to brace the knife against your hand. And these are the kinds of things that are critical to be able to get at these other levels if we're going to attract other people into computing, but also if we're going to be able to use what the human body is good at, the human sort of nervous and perceptual system is good at being able to get good at. And to that point of like the afferent and exoferent systems, you have this 3 degree of freedom control in your hand, but you also have the 6 degree of freedom control of your head, which is really interesting to be able to control and know what you're looking at and have that sort of confidence. And so that was the thing that sort of linked it in. But I strongly recommend anybody with a Quest to play with it on the browser.
So before I agree with you, just a little bit of disagreeing with you because it's more fun.
Sure, yeah.
When I'm in Photoshop at the level of skill that I have, isn't clicking a slider like this, it really is like this, because the keyboard and the trackpad, it goes so fast and I know when to click. So that means that if you really embrace the trackpad and keyboard shortcuts, it becomes very close. But of course, you're talking about a magnitude larger. I just wanted to make that tiny distinction. So is this something?
Sure.
So with the Oculus that's getting delivered this week, will I be able to just go to a web page and miraculously do this?
Yeah, you can go to the webpage now and manipulate it in 2D. It's this one here, YouTube transcript. So you can tumble in this view, and you can left click and right click to tumble and track. Unfortunately, I don't have the view on the origin properly, but if you move that 3D locator around, then you have the ability to manipulate this thing. And a friend of mine said he was surprised once he got it into 3D, because in 2D it felt quite unwieldy to manipulate to use this manipulator. But the fact is that once you have multi-dimensional control, and remember, with VR, especially with hand tracking, you don't just have 3 degrees of freedom or even 6 degrees of freedom. You have 27 degrees of freedom based on the full range of articulation of each human hand. So you have 2 times 27 degrees of freedom. That means that we have. Sorry.
Now, Grant, it's getting a little bit abstract. Could you share on your screen while you're doing it live, just the normal 2D, because I haven't fully understood what the different axes do properly, and it would be really good to know that.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I do want to touch back on the 27 degrees of freedom, though, or if you have more information about what I would actually love to see is a graphic or an animation that explores each of the 27 degrees, which sounds like a freaking mouthful, but I mean, some of them are obvious, but you were breaking them down into interesting pairs earlier. And what were the words again? It was what was it? Reafferent and
it was
exafferent.
and exafference. Yeah,
Exafferent. Yes.
Yeah, because of the afferent. But hang on a second, just really briefly. Sometimes we're going to the whole philosophical, spiritual side of things here, and I think these degrees of freedom do that, because we can. Let's pretend we're talking to some person of a political point of view that we disagree with, and they're saying, you know, I need my freedom. And it's like, well, freedom, even in moral philosophy, isn't one-dimensional. It's not to or from one single thing. It's multidimensional. So I think that maps onto this more different freedom. I just thought that was lovely. Anyway, yeah. Brandon,
yeah, absolutely.
Share screen.
So I need to quit and reopen in order to share my screen. I'll do that, and it should be a few seconds, but I need to do.
Okay.
I will do that now.
Is there an agenda for today, or is this just addition about the last day of the year kind of stuff?
It's New Year's Eve.
Oh, so you're just telling me to chill out? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we can go through our little spreadsheet. We have a few wonderful people lined up. We can go through that in a little bit, but I don't think I can go much over the hour today due to multiple family things happening.
Okay.
Now.
Well, I want to talk about maybe not today, but like, you know, next year, the meetings, but also the potential newsletter or periodical publication. Why
don't we just agree that on Monday, that will be our discussion. It will be the community with a focus on the meeting and newsletter. Do we all agree on that, guys?
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
And I do hate saying guys, we need more ladies.
I do.
But that's another story.
I would like to take a more substantial role in some of these things as my time allows, but I think I could figure that out. I got questions about this interface, sir.
Sure. So this is the list of words. Right now it isn't normalized for the base frequency within the English language, and so, you know, that is obviously and always the most frequent word anyone ever uses. If they're not, then there's something weird going on. But yeah, so if you control this in X and Z, you have the ability to change sort of which one is looked at. That's fairly understandable, and you can increase the height, and so that's whatever height your hand is at. This here is the thickness, that sort of feathering or fall off, so that you can look at a range of things or pull it out to look at it as a single thing. And the qualitative sort of effect of picking up a carpet of data is really funny because of the way that it sort of sags, and it just reminds me of those British Pathé videos of people working in a factory on wallpaper or carpet and manipulating it expertly and bodily, and thinking that it would be fun for data scientists to develop that level of physical skill with these things.
Okay,
yeah.
So a question, let's look at any word. Let's look at the word able. What is the word able? Wait, actually, just grab any word. It really doesn't matter for this question. But once you look at it, what does it actually mean being in that location? What is it going from left to right? What are those cool squiggles?
So this cool squiggle is it's kind of a moving main with decay of when in the video it occurred. So this is an hour long or hour and a half call, and so you can see that Abel popped in at these various points and decayed to these amounts. So that it's a fairly naive sort of implementation of a moving main to try to figure out when specific words occurred. And
So
in this, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, if we do this for this conversation now, if I now say able again, and then able, say it a few times, it would basically flatten it towards the top for a while.
Yeah. So what's this word? Sort peaked at the end of the conversation. People presumably were talking about sorting something out for the benefit of maybe the symposium, something like that. And there's also a lot of ums in here, primarily toward the beginning, ums and uhs.
That is so cool, because in the beginning, we're the most halting and not into it yet.
Right, exactly. And so there are, you can start to see those things, and you can see those co-occurrences. This is just one particular view of it. Another thing that I've done in the past with YouTube, not transcripts, but the comments, because this was before they automatically evaluated transcripts. And that there are there's the long line of these things down here. In a desktop, you can view the first 1,000 or so. In Quest, it's a little bit slower, so you don't have the full capability. Based on what I'm currently doing, we probably would be able to come up with a mechanism for controlling these things. You can see when author starts to come in today. But another thing that I've done in the past, like I said, is building the co-occurrence graph. So based on the proximity, based on the base frequency of a word like the, you would expect it to co-occur with other words in proximity about a given frequency. And so if it's positively or negatively correlated, you can color those with edge weights, close or far, and then allow a force repulsion graph to resolve to see how far apart words are based on that. And that's visible and legible to some extent in 2D, but it's a lot easier to manipulate in 3D because you can make your own view selection, like you say, with reafferent sort of control. And so, I'm looking forward to adding new things. One of the things that was funny about this is that at first I wasn't going to build it in 3D. I was just going to build 2D canvas elements and align them on a page so that I could look them up, look at them all sort of down a page. But then I thought, hey, what the hell? Why not put it into 3D, because it is actually easier to generate graphics. And the boilerplate that I use is also default VR now as well. So then I was like, why not put some kind of view manipulation in here that is interesting?
What are you coding? Are you? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I might start when I saw A-frame, which is a closure in Web 3 JS rather. I was thinking about maybe trying my hand at coding some in VR. What are you coding? Do you use like straight Unity or something?
No, this is 3JS.
It is. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a one-pager boilerplate that I use for a lot of different things. This is probably the easiest one. This is a real simple thing, and it gives you the ability to, if you have VR, then you can click on this button and it'll load up. But I made a really fun little synthesizer keyboard, and you can play this with 10 fingers in VR.
Can you throw the XR framework link in? And quick question for the group. Oh, that's adorable.
They look at you and they look at each other and they look at your hands and things like that as well. So that it's a whole performance. I'll stop sharing that.
Question for the group, and it might actually require that you go back to the demo, but this is more I'm going to try and describe, this is my old theme that I go back to. So either it made sense the first time or it won't make sense again. But I'm looking for a word or a vocabulary to describe this kind of thing, right? So going back to your graph and the words and the carpet, right? If you were to move to the other side of the carpet, right? So it's here, you're going to move over there. Then what I see in my head is that movement is a degree of freedom that is indicating I want to change the XY axes, that I want to, so a simple view of it would be like, by moving, I can now see the different speakers, right? Who said ums and ands and whatnot, right? But in a way, that could just be done by coloring the bits and dots or some other extra element. But what I'm thinking of is an actual shifting the XY. So the data stays the same, but you're looking at different data now as it relates to the same entities or the same transcript. Is there a study of that approach?
So I mean, where moving your head changes the representation.
No, it's more like where so in my understanding, the XY axis in any infographic is the kind of a framework that is unquestioned. And I'm talking about ways to not just zoom in and out of the XY, but to replace Y with A and X with B, still with the same data and the kind of flex between that. There's got to be people working on something like that.
Yeah. So I've linked him before. There's a guy, Maxime Cordell, at Monash University in Melbourne, and he's got some really interesting immersive axes things
Yes.
where you have these objects. He's also made tangible axes where you have physical things that you move around and can manipulate, and then in augmented reality, you see them. You can change sliders. Hello.
Hey. I think I saw that demo and I appreciate it. I'm still struggling with. I don't think I'm explaining it clearly enough. So I'm going to go back.
But it's sort of view specs in a different with extra dimensions.
It is, yeah. And being able to manipulate which axes you're kind of emphasizing, being able to create being able to sort of do dynamic principal component analysis with your hands by sliding up and down different parameters as having significance, being able to separate spaces. I think
but
that's
it's
something
more
special.
embodied though.
Oh, so you're thinking
like,
with your view?
I'm thinking like, by if I'm looking around my room and I looked to the left, it would be as if, and this is a metaphor, this isn't a great example yet, because I don't have a good metaphor for what I'm trying to define. But it was as if I looked to the left, I would see it in winter. And if I look to the right, I would see it move to summer, Same view, but I'm looking at it in a totally different way. That's still not. Anyway, go ahead, Frode.
Are you thinking about maybe something that can be illustrated as, you look at my head right now. If you walk around me, it's actually open from the back. So you can see brain stuff on the inside. As you keep moving in a circle, more of the skull goes away. So you can, it's like you're unpeeling it. You know what I mean? So where you are changes what you see. Maybe.
Yeah, and to ground it into something that I feel like would be really useful. Let's say we're all working on a piece of software together. We're all on a team, right? And so we all have different epics or features if you wind up doing that, but you also have like a conversation in the brainstorming sense of all the different directions where the product can go or where the feature can go, right? And those happen over time and then they get abandoned or forgotten, right? So if we're looking at what is essentially like a VR JIRA, as awful as that is,
I'm for it.
You could see the different points as like tasks or something, right? But then as you walk around, it's the walking around part or twisting the view that says, okay, now I'm going to go from amount of tasks to like complexity or narrative throughput, like dependencies, you know, and so rather than shifting, it's the act of walking that's changing, that's saying this is what I'm interested in. So yeah, kind of like what you're talking about, Frode. I don't know if that makes any sense.
I'm going to let it go over to Peter and then Mark, but I'm just sitting here listening to you and I'm noticing my head goes sideways, but I'm wondering, quite a human thing. So even that could be a way of saying, take it to a higher level. And I think what we're discussing now is part of the core of some of the promise of, wow,
So
it can be
fun.
completely different.
Yeah.
Peter.
I love that.
Okay, I dropped a link to the Your Wish is My Command, the book is on programming by example from my library. I also put a link to a wonderful 3D controller, works very nicely with Blender for altering camera positions inside of Blender. And also I wanted to ask Brendo whether the words could be coalesced into WordNet synset so they could all be glommed together to give you a better idea as opposed to them being separate terms.
Yeah, so I didn't catch those links because I had to drop out. So if anybody has the ability to repaste them, I would be very grateful. There's no limit to what the visualization that is actually within the that YouTube transcript actually is. So to the extent that those things can be computed, they can be then re-represented with that extra degree of dimensionality that's present within the VR system. The question would then be just how do you get that data set and how amenable is it to finding an extra dimension to inject into it? Thank you very much.
Interesting.
And so yeah, like that's an interesting and an open question as to where to get those things and how to analyze it. I need to find a good way to reach in and get some nice dense graph data, and probably the word correlation stuff will work. It's the phrase that I keep forgetting on this call is the Erdős-Rényi model. Paul Erdős is the person who invented session network analysis in many regards, and having a randomly connected graph with some average degree of nodes connected is the way that you create those things, Frode, that I was talking about, the number of friends that each person has, and the attendant confusion that one gets from looking at that. So I'm going to build one of those, either synthetic data or maybe my own real data, to take a look at what sort of impact it has to look at those things in VR. And it should be trivial to throw that up into a sort of a VR context to be able to show to people. Yeah, no, one of the things that it occurs to me talking to you folks in here is that I'm really glad that everybody here is excited by VR. The blessing and the curse of it is that I think very few other people in the world understand that this is what VR is actually for. They all think that it's for watching really cool videos or playing really badass games. And that's down to just about every single person working within the field to develop the technical state of VR. So it'll be very exciting for people like us to take the initiative once that sort of thing wears off and say, did you know that you can actually do Excel better? So that's going to be fun.
Mark.
The reason I stuck my hand up, well, there were two things. Way back when you were showing the visualization carpet, one of me saying, so what's the underlying data under that? Is it just a large data table?
Yeah, so there's a JavaScript file in here. Oh no, I load the transcript. So in that directory, there's transcript.txt.
Okay. Sure. But the other thing I was thinking when I was listening to Alan speaking earlier, I was thinking there's an interesting challenge, and challenge I think is the right word because I don't want this to sound a negative thing. Because what I find fascinating here is this idea. Yes, so you map basically all these other axes onto what you're doing, and how we deal with the ones that are less categorized. So where it's, in a sense, a more or less, or it might just be, 6 disparate but not necessarily ordered or well-defined things, which in here we do quite well. And that I think there's an interesting challenge there into how we might be able to put those into a sort of an axis in a virtual view spec, so that we can do exactly what Alan's saying. So one, we might just rotate it round onto an axis that, unlike the things we're more familiar with, where it's neatly ordinal or categorized or something, but where it's a case of it's a bit more of this or a bit less of that, in a way of being able to navigate the space. So you go in onto that axis, you maybe go from the less to the more end, then you turn it back onto something, and like as not, you come out in a completely different place. And that is the power of the discovery that the ability to swap across these axes offers.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely, like, I'm not wedded to this particular visualization. If anything, it's the view manipulation that is interesting with that locator. But I envisioned that being able to direct something by say taking an element like a fiducial of some kind and sort of moving that into the space in order to have a certain ordering principle kind of intervene on it with a certain intensity, and then taking another one and then moving those around with proximity. There was a really interesting augmented, it's not even augmented reality, but a mixed reality tangible thing called React Table, a music visualization system where it was the proximity of different elements to each other on a table that was then visualized with a projector down onto it, that created beats, and you turned those elements in order to be able to manipulate those things. Bill Buxton is a big fan of what kind of psychic impact you have as a consequence of having a really big table that you can modify modify the relationship of physical things on that table for controlling stuff. And so, yeah, I think that there's an inordinate number of capabilities that are opened up as a consequence of that. I mean, they are the kinds of things you have in a word graph, but they're, you have so much more capability once you realize that we have a lot of things we do. Like Frode said, you tilt your head, you can move and tilt your hands. And yeah, I agree. I would argue that I'm pretty good at Photoshop and Illustrator from doing many decades worth of work in it now, and it's exceptionally difficult actually to explain to people unless you're versed in explanation what you're doing, because you don't think of tools, let alone keys. You just press these particular hand phrases into the keyboard and move things. Programs like Blender take that even further with pie menus and things. So you just shift and then left click and right click and down and to the right in order to get into certain modalities. But I think that the extent to which that richness can be felt by more people who are don't have to be as invested in learning the tools is even greater, orders of magnitude greater, because of the way that it's just less physically alienating than the kind of impoverished sensory environment that we find ourselves within computers.
Because what's really interesting, and just one quick sort of riposte thought before passing over to somebody else's, is that what's really interesting there, and I think back to your point about people are over invested in making kick-ass games or whatever, is the sense that also I'm beginning to have a sense that when people about those sort of early wireframe movies they saw, where the 3D is about basically rendering badly a three-dimensional object in this virtual space, rather than something that's much closer to tools that we're probably familiar with as a group of, sort of where you basically have an unbounded map, where in many things at the moment it's a 2D map, but you can put things anywhere you like and the map never runs out. And if it just has to be over there, well, that's over there. You need to worry about how far it is. So this idea that actually in a 3D, in an ND space, you're so in other words, it's not about can I walk around the back of that block there. It's more that I can lay as many axes as I want over this and allow them to interact.
Yeah, and I think that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Brando.
I also think, to your point, Mark, the fact that rendering, portraying three-dimensional stuff was so inordinately difficult at the outset of people's vision for virtual reality, then they really over-indexed on the fact that, one, making good pictures was important, and two, getting up to frame rate, whatever. But it means that people have like, for God's sake, like Oculus Quest shipped hand tracking as an afterthought. This hardware platform was never intended to have hand tracking. That's how little it was on people's roadmap as an important kind of feature. And it was only because of the inconvenience of having to pick up a controller that they realized, oh, maybe we should do 27-degree tracking of your hand. That is vastly more important in terms of if you look at the somatosensory homunculus for the human body, or the motor homunculus, these are the scaled sort of versions of what things are, scaled to the amount of real estate in the brain devoted to those things. We're basically just platforms for hands. And so if you have the ability to manipulate things with every degree of freedom of your hands, then the amount of information, not just that you can get from it, I mean, so haptic feedback would be incredible, but the amount of feedback, the amount of input that you can put into a system, the amount of nuance and delicacy that you can have with your hands is just incomparable to the kinds of things that we can do with a 2-degree of freedom pointer of our mouse and the binary control of a keyboard, the on-off-ness of it. We don't have, if we had pressure sensitivity on keyboards, it would be different, but yeah.
Brandel, it's first off, love the nod to homunculus. That's actually why I had a magazine and still think of doing a newsletter called Little Man, as one of the many references to the little man in our head, or the army of little men, all the various brain theories. In that vein, I was describing future of text the other day, and I stumbled onto something that may be a bit of a theme I'd like to get your thoughts on. I think it goes nicely in the contrast of thinking of the big table, thinking also of how delightful mechanical manipulation of tools are, versus digital. How there's insight and cognition and steering a ship versus pressing a screen, and I feel like how I was describing is we have thoughts before we have words, or it's a complicated relationship. Thoughts can produce words, thoughts can occur before words, whatever, and that's all fine, but the tools that we've been using have been a direct result of turning logic gates, into basically series of ones and zeros, and from there, not just the ones and zeros, but it's been very literal. It's been devices for literal data manipulation, right, from the very earliest days, Lisp and earlier. And I don't think we've ever left that mentality, at least in the tools that we are currently using. I think VR is a first step of, or at least the demos, the potential steps away from the encasing of categorization, the framework of the people who made the original computers. But even still, I wonder how its applications will work if the only way that it can interact with the real world is through these tools, these interstitial tools that are still, or are practices that are still now totally encased in this categorical thinking. Another way to put that, Tim Berners-Lee said this as an answer to a question. It's hilarious. It was probably on Digital Planet several years ago, and they were asked. He was being asked about AI and robots, and the future of work, and whether like AIs will change our work, and make us into robots or something. And his answer was delightful. It was like, well, work's already made us into robots. Like that's already occurred. So the AI's job is just going to be easier. All right, I'll stop now.
Yeah, so there's this fundamental rift in computing you described it well. And people say that it's good at chess and bad at frisbee, and that a lot of people thought that it was important to be like that because they thought that chess was cool and for cool people. That chess was obviously the more difficult problem, and dumb things like frisbee are things that dogs can do. And so obviously that's not an important thing. And Boston Dynamics is living proof of how much harder it was to do that. And they have gotten good at it, for their sin. But yeah, there's this rift between I believe, I'm not sure if these are the correct terms, but data processing, which is where artificial intelligence, all of these like press button, get amazing result, versus control theory as two sort of camps, CP Snow style but within computing itself of what computing actually is. And I went into computing in undergrad thinking that I would be a fan of data processing, and ended up completely revolted by it, because I want to do stuff. I want to interact in a milieu of things in the same way that working in a group and conversing is this kind of squishy, constant renegotiation of where the conversation is, what people are paying attention to. And I would love for my relationship to a Photoshop document to be like that. So yeah, well put. And I look forward to the future with everybody and bringing this back to actual text. Frode, sorry.
Just on that last thing there, Brandel, I think it's also characterizable as being the difference between AI and IA, artificial intelligence or intelligence augmentation, very much language that we share. So a couple of things there. Number one, the ending of my thesis is on VR under future work. It says, I've been saying, and I will continue to say, there's much more work to be done in a rectangle. We haven't in any way exhausted that. However, if we do, the kind of irony of VR is that what you said, Brandel, and this is what I've written, that VR will be amazing, but just like Microsoft Word opened and closed minds when it became the default cultural understanding of text on a computer, we as a community, no one else, we have the responsibility to make sure that the world sees that VR is run around, shoot and watch videos, sure, but when you get to work, it is absolutely mind-blowing, because that isn't part of it. When I bought the Oculus, not going to be here for a few days, of course I went lots of videos and downloaded some apps. The apps so far are frighteningly basic, as is fine. These are early days, but we have a strong responsibility to, like the stuff, Alan, you had problems talking about earlier. Those are the kinds of problems we need to look at together. There's no question. And in terms of the future of text, yes, this is the future of text. Just like, my Apple Watch is part of the future of text. They all are media access points rather than media. It's the same stuff on the inside, but we experience it differently. And I have this dream of opening a laptop, putting on my headset, and it literally comes out into a big space, work with it. When I'm done with the headset, I just put it away and it's there, like we have these different ways. So that means for the community, I think, number one, next year is going to be much harder because some kind of component of this should be going into the new dimension, because I think all of us here are completely naive. Brandel less so than the rest, but he is intelligent enough from what I've heard to know how little he knows. And that's what's amazing. It's a whole new world, and a lot of people think they know, we all accept we don't. So Alan, for your community side, newsletter, monthly meetings, and so on, maybe we should take a few minutes on that now, knowing that we're going multidimensional next year, including staying with this dimension. I mean, not throwing that away.
Yeah,
so,
Alan, I think there is a way to bridge it all.
Yeah, if you want to talk about that, Alan, that would be great.
Sure. I know, well, we're running out of time, but yeah, I do think there's going to be a bit of a delicate dance to explain it, promptly, concisely, how all of these various concerns sort of fit under an umbrella. But I do think the future of text is a good umbrella for that, because it's so open-ended that people are like, it's like a Zen cone or something.
Alan, on that, can I just interject something?
Yeah.
I used to fight very hard for the future of text being, characters. I now accept that we have to take it as a wider reading of text. So I'm fully on board with that.
Oh, good. I think that does open the doors quite a bit as to the times I think of when someone asked me, what does it mean, and I took it along the lines of it's a technology that we have lived with for so long that we don't realize our relationship, our symbiotic relationship with it. So that could also apply to other technologies. There's text is not language, right? But it is interwoven with language. It is not underneath language always, but it's a good example of a kind of evolving interstitial technology, right? Essentially all apps are text and forms, right? It's funny that they're called applications. Where you might apply to a job, when you fill out a form, you are applying to get food sent to you. And even though it looks like a map interface for Uber Eats or whatever, it's still an application that you're submitting. Anyway, I don't have, I've got too much to say on how to maybe tackle those topics in a newsletter form, but despite that, the newsletter needs to point to a longer timescale location where the newsletter can just be some fun tidbits, like even in today's talk, I was arranging things, and I can show it to you, but books mentioned, right? There's obviously Brandel's demo and some of the links there, some products mentioned, some authors mentioned, and themes and topics is the part that I think would take a little bit more orchestration to be like, this plays into this theme, and what to call that. And that's almost the hardest part of any kind of writing, but maybe we can all figure that out together. Some tenets that our talks seem to fall into. So that when we do have like a tidbit, it could go into mind and motion, etc., body cognition. I really did want to bring up another topic though, based off of what we're talking about. So anyway, Peter, go ahead. You got your hand up. It looks like it's been a while, I think.
Yes, I'd like to see us have at least one or maybe two sessions talk about interactive fiction technology. There seems to be a lot lurking in the peripheral, and it does bring in a temporal dimension to our text as opposed to a 3D spatial dimension.
Yes, excellent. Mark.
Sorry, just a quick recitative, and it's partly following on from the thing I just popped to the bottom of the chat, and I was listening to really what I was saying in riposte to Brendel earlier is that it sort of sunk in. Really, I was describing to somebody about incremental formalization, and I started talking about extra sort of axes of it, and I was like, "Whoa, you blow my mind! I'm trying to do this in sort of 1D. Steady on. This is too much. My mind can't cope." So a challenge is actually also to help people to is to not reach for the convenient. So, instead of saying, when I look into my 3D space, I expect to see sort of objects rendered as wireframes or something, because this is somehow culturally or whatever, this makes me feel comfortable. Say, no, look, it's just like an endless map. You can go in any direction you like. It's just a sphere. And that's actually quite challenging, and the less exposure you have to these sort of things, the more challenging it will be, regardless of your base level intellect. It's not a normative thing. So I think that's another sort of challenge in this space.
Mark, I think you just talked yourself into spending £300 on an Oculus. I think that's what just happened.
That wraps up into that last little thing I wanted to mention. It's funny how we're exploring this immersive space, and we're all clearly fascinated by it, the temporal and the spatial, etc. But I think Raphael, what he said on the last call was really great too, that his concern about VR is the democratization of it. But I'll put a slightly different spin on that. And I think it's another topic that we should explore. There was a past future that was fascinated with or projected that the future would be full of calm technology or peripheral technology that you didn't understand or didn't have to interact with, right? And it would actually, like, those things would go away. Like the perfect example is the grocery store doors that open as you walk, right? That's what we were supposed to have more of. And it seems that we've given up on that and are now like, I mean, I guess we could have that, but then there's no learning, or what happened to that dream? Is this, have we just fallen in with more and more interface as the way to go, more and more mediation? And yeah, what's the middle ground there? Yeah.
Okay, I had to put
ubiquitous technology. That's right.
That's the word. Yeah. Sorry, I had to put up 3 hands for that, because the kind of the analogy there is, if you want to go a long distance, probably some of the way you're going to go with public, like a plane or a train or something, but it's only going to take you roughly where you want to go. Wherever you want to go somewhere really specific, skill and effort has to be used, right? So we're talking also about intellectual effort. Some people will optimize a train to make it really pleasant. That's fine. I'm not interested in that. And as I'm sure all of you have heard in my BBC interview, yes, hope you heard it. Sorry, love saying that. And towards the end, they asked me, what's the benefit of the software that we're working on for everyday people? And I said, there is none. It's not for everyday people. We're building knowledge tools. We're not building a comfy chair to just sit on. So it's completely valid to build comfy chairs. I have a comfy chair, but that's not my involvement is for someone who's willing. I'm not saying they should learn programming or even keyboard shortcuts, but I'm saying there has to be some cognitive curiosity to engage. Otherwise, it's like you're literally putting sand under someone so they can sit without making an effort. I'm not with Doug Engelbart, I used to discuss the whole ease of use every once in a while because he hated it, as you all know. But he did agree that things that there's no reason should be difficult should be easy. So he completely agrees, shave away all the crud, all the clerical stuff that doesn't need, get rid of it, absolutely. But when it comes to being a jet fighter or a downhill skier or an acrobat or whatever, or any kind of a knowledge worker, knowledge will have to be expanded. And I don't have a problem with that.
Disagree.
Or did you disagree?
Yes,
or agree?
for the sake of it.
Oh, Mark, can you pause your hand for a minute while Alan? And
yeah, no, absolutely. Alan, carry on. No, I'm not in a hurry. I'll move myself.
Yeah. So my challenge is this.
There we go. Oh no.
By saying for the knowledge worker, right? It's for the expert skier. You've already saddled us into a world that is artificial. It is not the necessary real world, right? The real world is one where I can walk through the shopping mall and the doors open, and then I turn around while I'm in the shopping mall and work on my recipe for, I don't know, banana pudding. I should say grocery store. Maybe
you just killed yourself. You just killed yourself with your own hand grenade.
Not really, because what I'm doing is I'm zooming between two. I'm zooming the tools that we're actually, the breakthroughs in the tools for thought are actually, because they marry, they're the first time that you can have the easy, comfy chair and dive into your deep work as you want.
Yeah.
Two different mentalities.
Yeah, but of course, opening the door should be easy. No question. There should be no effort. I hate that kind of stuff. I hate when buttons are the wrong way. To spend mental energy on stuff that doesn't have a real reward is completely horrible, even if it's a physical object. But the thing of making something from a recipe requires concentration, skill, and knowledge to do even a recipe. Alan, by the way, I do think we agree. I think you're just kind of stretching the point for the discussion. But in terms of as a community going forward, I'm not interested in building Tetris in VR, but I am interested in building something. Someone comes in, and just like with Doug Engelbart's demo, wow, how in the world can we do that? Flying through hyperspace with both hands at the controls, right? And then we need to get the excitement, and then someone, okay, you want to learn how to do this? Here are the stages. And of course, the 5 of us here in the bigger community, we're going to disagree about what that means many, many times. But I think we all agree that.
When you do, okay, Dad? I'm still
Peter,
on.
Peter, you're on. I can mute you actually. Anyway, Mark, and then a little bit back to the community before we close, I think.
Sure. I sort of, again, drawing some threads together and I think it was Alan mentioned this idea that, well, we had this idea that, we'd have better doors, or we'd have all these affordances. And I'm thinking, yes, and this is half the problem, because you build a good door and then suddenly the world says, right, what we need is an even better door. So this goes back to Brandon's point about the sort of I can't what you call it, but the data analysis sort of side of it. Right, let's be really tailorist about this and make this as efficient as it can be. The fact that the one we built was actually good enough is lost on most people. And there's this vast, so you see this all the time in the application space at the moment, right? Someone makes a quite good time tracker, and then suddenly there are 8 other people who said, oh, well, clearly people like that. So I'm gonna put all this effort into it. And yet time is an important thing. Going back to Peter saying, the temporal aspects, I thoroughly agree with this, through lots of, when we look at things, is really interesting. And this is one of those extra dimensions that we find actually quite hard to visualize. The closest we get to it is to normally make it the x-axis of many of our visualizations in 2D. Mm-hmm. But actually, that's not most helpful, because one thing that time of most of the things I've ever worked with in terms of data is the lumpiest. That's just the way we humans tend to interact with time. Is it doesn't lend itself to a beautifully linear space. So there is this thing that, and the last point I was going to make, the thing that made me think about time is that it's this solipsism that we massively overvalue our own time. So we spend disproportionate amount of effort making time-saving devices, when the time spent on making the time-saving device could have been used on something so much more profitable. And I'll stop there.
Okay, so in kind of closing from my side at least, what I want is a year from now that we all don our headset of whatever brand happens to be fashionable then. And we go into something extremely similar to what Brandel showed today. And this magic carpet, we're able to change in any way, just like with Adam's tab to change the visualization, we can do that. We can have all the records of all our discussions. We go through, we can pinch up the carpet to see video from there. We can change the parameters instantly to be by sentence, to be by person, whatever the heck we want. But at the same time, we also have a printed journal. And we find a way to make those two things happen. I think we have to start with the printed journal. We have to decide on the editorial process. I don't mind being the editor and exporting from author to PDF, but if someone else wants to do it, that's absolutely fine. Because what we're talking about in our journal will be video, maybe transcripts from the monthly meetings, a separate list of these are the recommended websites, or, by the way, are you guys frozen?
Seeing other people's footprints, in the loosest sense of the word, across it. Looking at that carpet and say, oh, yes, interesting, everyone went and stood in that corner. Well, why? Because if it's totally self-evident, we're probably doing it all wrong. We're applying far too much prior knowledge and not actually looking at the information that's being afforded us in front of our very eyes.
So, sorry, guys, when I lost connection there, it was actually funny because I think Mark just went into one of those listening views, and I actually said, are you guys frozen? And yes, you were. You all looked perfect. Anyway, so yeah, what was the last thing you remember that I said? Sorry, guys.
You're saying that we should be reading PDFs in VR.
Oh, that's not quite fair.
But, and then work on a printed copy. So you were saying we also need to emphasize the importance of being able to develop a printed record of something that's representative of the stuff that happens in this amazing mindscape cyberspace of specs.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we need to start with something really boring. Let's pretend this is 10, 15, 20 years ago. We're going to have a fanzine or a journal. Let's not think of it as being fancy, something super simple. It's going to have the transcript once a month. All the links to our videos will be in there, and every text chat will be in there. So all the books and references are in there. So we should probably talk a little bit on Monday about the mechanics of that, because it's so easy for us to balloon into all kinds of areas, do something really prosaic, right? So you've seen the people that we have on the list, I think. So Richard Saul Werman also agreed, which was quite lovely. He has interesting perspectives. Jed Esper at, I can't remember right now. Where is he again? Anyway, these are great text people.
Fiber something you've got there, demo. Line 23, row 23, you had Jed. Sorry, line 23.
Jed, below, yeah, he's at Harvard doing some amazing, interesting stuff there. But I do think we really can't do it every 2 weeks. You know, like right now, Brandel is in April because I email people and they replied a bit too quickly. That's not cool. You know, I think we should consider that every 2 weeks. And I think also within here, maybe what we should do is have guest editorships. So let's say, you know, Alan says he wants to be much more involved, which is wonderful, as do I, with the community. So we can say that January is down to Alan if he wants it. Maybe next time, you know, we all have to agree, but someone's weight has a little bit more weight, so to speak.
It was very interesting and pertinent to this was Frode very kindly shared a link, which he probably, I suspect, sent to everyone here. And it was somebody said, was it Dave Crocker?
All right.
Loved it. Totally identify with this opening thing about, you know, I understand correction far too much and I ruin people's lives because of it. But no, just what was really interesting was the real strand of very positive pragmatism that actually ran through his recitative of the things he'd been involved in, and how that reflected back on the technology in terms of liquid that you showed him. But at the end, you put the fly across and would you like to take part? And there was a sense of, well, I don't know what I contribute. And I think that's sort of the challenge, because, and it wasn't anything wrong that you said. It's more that we're stuck in this thing of, well, I'm supposed to turn up like the performing monkey and say something so the audience don't throw shoes at the end, as opposed to saying, no, just turn up and say stuff. People will be enthralled anyway. And even if they don't understand it, they'll be interested to learn about stuff, you know, open their mind to things they didn't know before. And it's a sort of invitation that we don't get very often. And we're culturally attuned against doing it. And I think back to the time, you know, when we were both studying together, and you go into the lab and you say to people, you know, come, someone's giving a seminar, so, oh, I'm all too busy. So, God, what's the worst that could happen? You might learn something. You might just learn something you don't know, and they'd look at you sideways like you're completely bonkers.
I think that's a very important point, Mark, that we need to work more on in what way we are open to people, because Dave, I mean, if you haven't seen the interview, it was actually for my PhD, but it was useful enough, and Vint saw it and commented too. You know, he has a vast history, and even he was like, oh, I don't know, which is a bit scary. So it's been mentioned before, and we need to keep reaffirming our way of being friendly.
Yeah, and I don't think you're doing, and in saying that, I don't think you were doing anything wrong. What I was just reflecting is the fact it's almost a thing that we're all almost culturally, you know, injected against.
Absolutely. So that has to be, you know, we're not going to try. I mean, even though Alan and me are particularly interested in the community, we have discussed things, and we're not trying to become like a million people follower kind of thing. This is about supporting people who really want to be here. But even to get the people who really want to be here, they need to know we exist, and we need to know that we're very friendly, so to speak.
Absolutely. If people want to be here because of the people in it, that's the moment I want to leave.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm a member of the Groucho Club.
Salon des refusés.
I don't want to be a member of a club that will have me as a member. Exactly. So anyway, I look forward to Monday. Now it's going to be New Year's soon. And I think we have set ourselves a fascinating task. And I think we need to keep being honest with each other what we want from this community. So if there are any strong wishes for new directions or uncomfortableness, we can do it as a group or separately. This is I mean, it's crazy. You guys show up twice a week, generally 2 hours. Why? It must be because we reinforce each other. If it becomes in any way uncomfortable, that has to be very, very easy to deal with.
A quick thought or challenge when it comes to the community building that might be a slightly different take. If we took the angle of being more like glue between different salons that have similar spirits, and there's one thing just to link to them, but if there was even a kind of a newsletter aspect that was, hey, let's actually, it's part Future of Text and part these guys, and it comes together in a like take the strength of similar, brothers in arms. There might be some opportunity there. It might be easier in some ways. It could also be more confusing, but I'll just put that out there.
I think that's really very, very clever, Alan. And I want structure, because structure gives freedom, right? Because then there's things you don't have to worry about. It's like when we go on family holiday, I asked the extended family, what are we doing? And nothing happens and nothing happens. If you set a few dinners in place, you have freedom to do whatever you want. So within this, maybe we do something like every single meeting, the first 15 minutes is a report from somebody who's been to something else. We try to make that time, or we say every 2 weeks or whatever it is. But that is absolutely perfect that we need to put that in a formal way to do that. Yeah. Because Alan and I, when we talked, it's not about building a brand, and we're not big ego people here who wants to stamp things. This has to be nurtured together. And that really does mean, the extended communities we have, we should, connect in an active way. So yeah, that's really clever.
I like the idea of sort of speaking across the salon, because again, if I learned anything from interdisciplinary research, it's the fact that we don't like the people from the next village, and we never have. So this idea of, looking out of your boundaries is really very alien to us at a quite atavistic level. And not because we're bad or ill will, but it's just that to a certain extent, we just know that bad thing happens if we talk to the other people. And that's a shame, because then we don't learn from it.
I would much rather sign up to a newsletter if I knew that it was going to be 5 reports from 5 different groups. It could just be 3 at a time or 2 at a time, but I knew that it was these different collectives, and even if they never talked together, I would be so in for a newsletter like that, because you're certain to get some gold. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's also good that the fact that not everything may immediately interest you is probably a good thing.
So
because
basically,
if everything seems on target, then maybe you're looking on a too narrow focus. So I like things that sort of where I maybe understand just a bit of it to start with, and as time goes by, I gradually sort of ratchet myself into an understanding of the broader whole.
So Alan, basically what you're talking about is this is a part of the community for tools for thought kind of stuff, right? Is that how everybody sees it?
It could go afield to the speculative fictions, perhaps, or if there was another group in the VR space, maybe, or there's a future of coding group. I don't know what exactly they're doing, but so there are different hats that people put on, but we're all looking at the same kind of stuff. So I don't know whether that's tools for thought or even more open than that.
If blogging still existed and WordPress was still open and used by people, half the problem would be solved. You'd have a really good RSS feed. And it's just sad the way things are at the moment with this. By the way, we do have a Visual Meta WordPress plugin now. You can select text and copy as BibTeX and paste. So that's fun. Chris has been working on that this week. But anyway, back to this. Some of this is going to require some editorial work, and we have to decide how that should be done. So let's plan. Monday is all about getting it out the door. We'll think of it as something like the future of text intelligence, even though that's a pretentious name. We'll find some name that means that, because it means it is what's going on in the wider community.
Yeah, good.
Have a wonderful New Year's. It's not ready to install yet, Peter. Chris is still playing. So have a wonderful New Year, and I look forward to next year, and I look forward to seeing you next year Monday.
Yeah.
Happy New
Happy
Year,
New Year
everyone.
to one and all.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Everybody, thank you.